Here we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Just trying to confirm if we're live. My name is Susan Cram. Welcome. I am the project manager for the Kidney Project, and I'm joined here today by Dr. Shuvo Roy, who's broadcasting from UC San Francisco. Dr. Roy, could you give us a wave? Thank you. And also joining us is Dr. Bill Fassel, and he is streaming from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Fassel, could you give us a wave? Thank you. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to answer a lot of Kidney Project community burning questions, as well as provide a formal program update. And real quick, I just want to introduce the format of our session today. We have questions that have been submitted in the past few weeks online on Facebook, and we're going to get through as many of those as possible. And you can also submit questions right now through our live chat, which we will be monitoring. And so we're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. But in addition to our live stream today, we will also be releasing our updated frequently asked questions document. So we will post that on Facebook just a few hours later today, as well as on our UCSF website, which you can navigate to. It's kidney.ucsf.edu. So you can find our updated FAQ document both on Facebook and our UCSF website later today. And to begin our session, I just want us to start at the beginning. So I'm going to ask Dr. Roy if he can describe to us the bioartificial kidney device and what is the Kidney Project. And specifically, we'll probably be using terms today such as hemofilter and bioreactor. So what are these components? And generally, can you introduce our program to our listeners? Dr. Roy.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. And it's a pleasure to be with you and the Facebook community, along with Bill and we'll call Dr. Fassel. So Dr. Fassel and I have worked on this idea for a bioartificial kidney for the better part of a decade. And he really got me as an engineer interested in delivering a solution for end-stage renal failure patients. So the bioartificial concept, the bioartificial kidney concept, is a device that combines a filtration unit with a cellular component that provides most of the functions of a native kidney. So it's a two-stage device where the first stage consists of silicon membranes that are manufactured using semiconductor manufacturing techniques to generate ultrafiltrate from blood, very much like the glomerulus of our kidneys, and then direct this ultrafiltrate to the cellular bioreactor that processes the ultrafiltrate, performs selective reabsorption, provides some of the metabolic functions of the tubule of our native kidneys, and directs the waste into the bladder as urine. And the idea of this device is going to be small and surgically located in the abdominal region, and will be able to provide its recipients with continuous treatment, allow them to be mobile and not be tethered to a machine like a dialysis patient would be, allow them to have a more normal life in that they can eat and drink more freely. They will not need transplant medications. And because we mimic many of the functions of a healthy kidney, they'll do better physiologically.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Roy, for the overview. I'm seeing that we have several more viewers that have joined us. So really quickly, just to reintroduce, this is the 2017 Kidney Project Live question and answer session. My name is Susan Cram. I'm the project manager for the Kidney Project. If you have messaged us on Facebook or over email, I am the one that has most likely responded to you. and it's been my honor to answer as many questions as possible. But today we get to hear directly from the source, and we have our two program directors, Dr. Shuvo Roy, streaming from UC San Francisco, who you just heard from, and we also have Dr. Bill Fissell, streaming from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. So we just talked about the overview of the device, and now what we're going to do is we're going to move into the questions that our community members have submitted online. And we're also watching our live chat stream, so please feel free to fill in questions there. I want to start today with the number one burning question of our community. And I think, Dr. Roy, if you could take this first question. Everyone wants to know, when is the bioartificial kidney going to be launched and available for patients?
Thank you for the question, and I completely hear that question as well from the community. So I think let's address that. So as many of you know who've been following us, we've been working on this project for the better part of a decade. And many thanks to all our supporters and the granting agencies and along with the community. I'm pleased to say that we're looking at our initial clinical trial is going to happen most likely at the beginning of 2018. And this clinical trial is the first in a series of clinical trials that will be required to demonstrate both safety and efficacy of the device. So what we anticipate in early 2018, and there's a very slight possibility we may be able to get it before the end of the year, as people know that we've talked about 2017 before, but more likely in the beginning of next year, is the clinical trial will test the safety of the materials used to construct the hemofilter, which is the critical functional unit of our device. The subsequent clinical tests will focus on verifying the feasibility, the performance of the hemofilter components until we eventually graduate to full implantation in humans to provide a therapeutic benefit. Now, this could occur as late 2018. Afterwards, we will continue to do the series of clinical trials until we demonstrate full safety and efficacy. To answer your question in short, when will the clinical trials begin? We're really hopeful that's going to begin in 2018. And there's always a very optimistic scenario we might be beginning at the end of this year. But we're knocking on wood and working as fast as we can to deliver on the hemofilter for early 2018.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to ask that question right off the bat because our viewers, I know, will be interested in it, but we will also circle back around and talk about clinical trials in more details. So everything you heard will also, be unpacked a little bit further along in our stream. We'll be here for an hour. And so I want to now switch topics, and Dr. Fissell, these next questions will be for you. And I want to ask a series of questions that we received from our Facebook community, and these are going to be more focused on daily life and what life might be like with the bioartificial kidney, and kind of more practical medical questions that viewers have. So first, to jump into a little bit technical one, this question came from Facebook user Mr. Cross J. And he asked, how does the bioartificial kidney affect hemoglobin and potassium/phosphate levels?
What a great question. So I'd like to welcome again everybody to this Facebook chat. We're excited to share our progress with you and excited to hear your questions and concerns and respond to them. So as everybody who's been on dialysis or knows a dialysis patient is aware, patients on dialysis have very restricted diets, and they are constantly plagued with questions, prescriptions, suggestions, guidance about exactly these minerals, about potassium in their diets, about phosphorus in their diets. They take a very burdensome number of pills to control phosphorus in the diet. And so it's a natural first question, gosh, is the thing that you're planning to do going to relieve some of this burden from us of not being able to eat all the foods that we grew up to learn were healthy for us, like fruits and vegetables and oranges and melons? And can we somehow get away from eating 12 pills that look like they were designed for a horse every day with our meals to block phosphorus reabsorption? Our goal is to have enough clearance of waste products with our bioartificial kidney so that patients will have a degree of dietary liberty that is unprecedented for patients with renal failure, but is normal for patients who have functioning kidneys or have received a transplant. So in terms, the big win here is that continuous therapy around the clock, something that is cleaning your blood, not just for 12 hours a week while you're in a dialysis center, but is working around the clock exactly the way a healthy kidney works, gives the body time to mobilize and excrete phosphorus. So that we anticipate, and our goal is that the same foods that are restricted for patients now, things like dairy products with phosphorus, fruits and vegetables with potassium, those same things patients are going to be able to eat and may even need to eat to supplement their diets. Regarding hemoglobin, I expect that hemoglobin management in patients who have an implantable artificial kidney is going to be very similar to hemoglobin management on dialysis. That is, the same hormone injections of erythropoietin that you're accustomed to on dialysis, you're going to continue to need with an implantable artificial kidney, because the same cells that make that hormone in the kidney are not the same cells that are initially going to be a component of the bioreactor in the implantable artificial kidney. That said, every time you go on hemodialysis, you lose some blood to the dialyzer. The dialyzer is never perfectly clean. So you need, as a dialysis patient, iron infusions and relatively high doses of erythropoietin to sustain healthy hemoglobin levels. It remains to be seen in clinical trials whether having a device that's functioning around the clock inside the body, where you're not routinely throwing away blood 3 times a week, will ameliorate some of the need for iron supplements and ameliorate some of the need for erythropoietin shots. We just have to find that out as we go. But that's how I see those issues, which are part of the dialogue of every dialysis patient in the United States, playing out with this biohybrid device. Not dialysis, and it's not a kidney transplant. It's a biohybrid implantable artificial kidney. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So next question then is for people who are considering or have a transplant option available, is this device, this bioartificial kidney device, as good as a best match live kidney from a blood relative, or do we know?
So that's a great question. And it's a question that we hear with some frequency, where patients have to go through usually prolonged and maybe nerve-wracking process to either get listed for a kidney transplant, to have a potential donor be evaluated for their suitability as a donor. There's always some challenge in the emotional context of having a friend or a family member or a loved one undergo a procedure to donate. So the whole transplant process tends to be a little bit fraught, but the gold standard for organ failure is replacement with another organ. So the best survival that we know about today in the context of renal failure, chronic renal failure, is transplant with a living related donor kidney. The implantable artificial kidney is not, at least right now, is not likely to deliver the same degree of waste product clearance as a best case implanted transplant kidney from a living related donor. On the other hand, we anticipate that the implanted artificial kidney is not going to require immunosuppressive drugs. It's not going to require the standard cocktail of, for example, tacrolimus, prednisone, and MMF. That is the daily diet of the transplant recipient. So the short answer is we know what the gold standard is today. It's a transplanted organ. How is this risk-benefit ratio of having a healthy organ that accomplishes all of the functions of a healthy organ, balanced against the risk and the burden of immunosuppressive drugs. That's going to end up playing out in our clinical trials. And I think it's premature for me to suggest that we could be as good as the present gold standard. What we hope to do is expand the availability of a transplant-like option to patients who cannot get one today. That's the goal of this project, not to try to be better than the gold standard today. It's to make something almost or as good as the gold standard available to everyone.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you. I want to plug in a question now I see from our chat because it's hitting on one of the coolest features, I think, of the bioartificial kidney. But I saw Kenyon Milton just typed in a little while ago, how is the bioartificial kidney powered, and does the power source need to be replaced?
What a great question. Would you like that to go to me or to Dr. Roy?
Yes. No, please, Dr. Fazal.
Yes, it'll go to one of us. Excellent. So the key enabling feature of the bioartificial kidney that lets us contemplate designing, assembling, testing, manufacturing, and delivering a bioartificial implantable kidney that's been the dream of nephrologists for a half a century. What makes us think that we can get this done where others have failed is actually the genius of Shuvo Roy, because Shuvo invented the first new membrane for renal replacement therapy in a quarter century. This is a membrane built using the same technologies that the microelectronics industry invented to make not a transistor radio, but to make a hemofiltration membrane for an implanted organ. And this membrane is so efficient that instead of needing the big, hot, power-hungry pumps of a dialysis machine, patients can use the pump they were born with. They can use their own hearts. So that's one energy consideration that's addressed by the new enabling technology of these silicon membranes, that we don't need a battery to power a pump. We use the patient's own pump. The other side of the equation in every dialysis unit is you see gallons of water being shunted all over the place. You see gallons of water, being supplied to the dialyzer and then being flushed down the drain. That's the role of the bioreactor. We don't need energy-intensive, high-pressure pumps to purify water for dialysate, because we instead use the chemical energy of living cells to do the transport and the purification process for us. So the two big energy hogs of dialysis, the blood pump and the water purification process, we instead use natural cellular energy of the beating heart and of the living cells to do these same transport processes, because that's how your actual kidney works.
Cool. Thank you. Welcome to everyone who's joined us in the last few minutes. My name is Susan Cram, and I'm joined here by Dr. Shuvo Roy and Dr. Bill Fissell, the directors of the Kidney Project. Dr. Fissell has just been reviewing for us some of the key features of the bioartificial kidney. And as we're hearing about, this amazing device and what it has the potential to do, I think this is leading us well into some questions about who may qualify to receive the device. So I have a question that was submitted earlier on Facebook by David Morales, and this question was reiterated by many community members, however, and so they're asking, if they've been on dialysis for years already, would they still qualify for this treatment?
So there's a context for questions like that. So way back in the 1970s, when dialysis was first introduced as a treatment for chronic renal failure, it was a scarce thing. There weren't a lot of dialysis machines. There weren't a lot of dialysis centers. So patients were evaluated for whether they were a candidate for dialysis. And this was, in fact, the birth of the bioethics science, because physicians hospitals would have to decide who got this scarce resource and who had to die. Then, once dialysis became abundant and renal transplantation became possible, really after the invention of cyclosporin and calcineurin inhibitors for immune tolerance, again, the number of patients who needed a transplant, who could benefit from a transplant, and the number of kidneys available were mismatched. So again, there's this idea of, are you a candidate for a transplant? Are you able to get a transplant? And that's decided by the transplant team. We want to do away with that idea that some get it, but not everyone. Our goal is that every single person who has renal failure is a candidate for our implantable artificial kidney. The only things that get in the way of this are you healthy enough to survive anesthesia? Can you get a surgery? Can you go to the operating room safely? Or is there something else going on with cardiovascular disease, with multiple heart attacks, that's going to get in the way of you safely undergoing anesthesia? Or patients who have been on dialysis for years often develop very stiff, diseased arteries and veins, particularly the arteries. And so the other criteria that we think about is there a blood vessel that a surgeon can sew to safely? These are the kind of mechanical things that are involved in every medical treatment decision that a dialysis patient entertains. However, this whole idea that there's 500,000 patients on dialysis in the United States and 20,000 patients who actually get a transplant out of the 100,000 people who are listed, this kind of weeding and winnowing process that arises from scarcity and from other medical conditions, the goal of this project is to do away with the scarcity problem in organ transplant by generating enough organs, biohybrid organs, that everyone who can safely go to the operating room, everybody who has a blood vessel that a surgeon can sew to, can be a candidate for this therapy.
Great. That is very encouraging to hear. I'm sure many of our viewers have been asking about eligibility for the device. So it's great to hear that, our goal is to allow so many more to have an option other than a live kidney transplant. Another question that was submitted by one of our Facebook community members, his name is John Smith, and I liked his question because he's asking about we're talking about a bioartificial kidney device, but people and patients are all very different. So how would the bioartificial kidney cope with different ultrafiltration rates for different patients? And does it mean there's a customizable kidney for different patients' body sizes? Basically, how does the device deal with different filtration capacities for different needs?
That's a great question. And so the short answer is that there's a device and then there's an environment of care that surrounds the device. So when you go to a dialysis unit, generally everybody in the dialysis unit is getting treated with the same dialysis machine. Just about everybody's treated with the same dialysis filter, but the prescription is tailored to the individual patient. Now, when you look at the patients who come into my office, you look at people who have healthy kidneys. Most people have very similar kidney function when their kidneys are functioning healthy, whether they're large or small, whether they're a man, whether they're a woman. Most people have about 120 ml a minute of glomerular filtration rate, irrespective of their body size. The kidney itself does a great job of adapting to how much fluid you drank, how much salt you ate, how much protein you ate, how much waste products your body generates. And we anticipate that much of that same adaptation will occur in the implantable artificial kidney as well. We anticipate that from a device standpoint, there's basically going to be one device for adults. But the way that the device is prescribed and the way that the environment of care in terms of monitoring, other medicines, fluid intake, that's going to get tailored from one patient to the next, and we hope eventually tailored by the patients themselves rather than by the medical team.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think that we just have one other question in the daily life spectrum, and that is that came from a Denise Schultz through Facebook, and she asked, is it possible to do sports and other general physical activities with the bioartificial kidney?
So again, it's so rewarding as a physician to be able to hear this question and also understand the context from which it comes. Many patients who are on dialysis, whether it be peritoneal dialysis or whether it be hemodialysis, have limits to their activities imposed by one thing or another. So many patients who have a peritoneal dialysis catheter are told they can't go swimming. They can't take a bath. Patients who have arteriovenous fistula for hemodialysis in their arm are told appropriately, you got to protect that arm. Don't put that arm at risk of anything. You can't be playing volleyball or football with that arm, because if you mess up that fistula or that graft, it's going to be a big deal and it's going to be life-threatening. So for our patients, our goal is that you do what you want. That our device will be implanted in the anterior abdominal wall down near the pelvis, the same as a transplant kidney will be implanted. And then you go about your life and you do what you want.
Awesome. I'm sure everyone will be pleased to hear that. Okay. I want to switch gears now and talk about our preclinical studies. So preclinical means animal studies, and we've been posting on Facebook for a while that we are currently conducting preclinical studies. So I'm going to switch us over to Dr. Roy. And Dr. Roy, if you could share with us what the updates from these preclinical studies are, what results can we share today?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And again, many thanks to my colleague, Bill, there about explaining many of the lifestyle possibilities with the bioartificial kidney. So to put the preclinical studies in context, to get to the preclinical studies, we had to do a lot of work prior to that stage, a lot of work on the computer and on the benchtop. And that is an iterative process where you design, build, test, simulate, a combination thereof, and do it a few times when you feel confident before you move to the preclinical work. And the preclinical work is designed to provide us information that will ultimately get us to the beginning of clinical trials. So the past few years, we have begun to wade into clinical trials, and bulk of our time now is in the preclinical work. And the preclinical work is going to provide the data that we'll need to support the beginning of a clinical trial. So where are we? So the kidney project overall is in the middle of preclinical work, and our focus has been, for the large extent, on the hemofiltration component, the unit that filters blood and generates ultrafiltrate. Along with our scientific and regulatory colleagues, we've identified that safety of the hemofilter is paramount to a functioning bioartificial kidney. So a lot of the focus has gone into showing that hemofilter is going to perform both functionally as well as safely in a preclinical animal model. We've also begun the preclinical testing of the bioreactor, but that is behind the hemofilter. To date, we have done a number of studies with the hemofilter, and those results are very encouraging. We've successfully implanted the hemofilter component into large animals for up to 1 month. The animals responded well without serious complications, and we have collected enough preclinical data now to apply for our first clinical trial that will be on safety. But we still need to do more preclinical work to build enough a sufficient data set and also generate enough evidence so we can convince private investors, the ones that will ultimately help us take this project towards patients, to get enthusiastic and fund the project, partner with us and fund the rest of the kidney project.
Great. Thank you for that overview. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fissell again and just ask a few more specific questions about our preclinical testing. But it is, so, the update we heard from Dr. Roy just now is that we are in the midst of preclinical testing for the hemofilter, and the bioreactor preclinical testing is just starting, is behind the pace of the hemofilter. So focusing on the hemofilter, Dr. Fissell, can you tell us, is that device already functional in animals? To what extent?
Absolutely. So it's one thing to have a device work on the bench. It's one thing to have something work once. It's another thing to have it be completely reliable. It's another thing for it to be robust enough to be carried into an operating room, implanted in an animal, connected to the animal's blood vessels. Animal's going to jump around. The animal has a heartbeat. There's pulse on the device. So now we've been able to implant these devices for an extended period of time, a month, as Dr. Roy said, and they function. They generate ultrafiltrate. The most exciting thing to us was that with all of the simulation work that Dr. Roy referred to, we've been able to implant these devices for a long period of time without systemic anticoagulation. Every dialysis patient knows about getting heparin with dialysis, so blood doesn't clot when it comes in contact with the artificial materials in the dialysis circuit, with the fibers in the dialyzer. And everybody worries about that. In our case, the modeling that Dr. Roy's team conducted, the surface chemistries, the biocompatibility studies that Dr. Roy's team conducted have let us move to being able to implant these devices for prolonged periods of time without any blood damage, without any clotting, without any loss of function. So I think we've been able in the last year to successfully move beyond simply, can we sew it in? Does it survive? Can we sew it in? Will it work for a little while? To being able to think about how we move this device, this project, this brand new membrane that Dr. Roy invented, from concept to something that people are actually going to be able to use and use safely.
Great. So for our preclinical trials moving forward, what would you say, if any, what barriers exist that the project needs to overcome?
So the barriers that we've been focusing on are obviously safety. So we need to understand how this new membrane with new materials works over the long term in a living animal, in a living person. So we need to scale this up. We need to make it bigger. We need to have more prolonged exposure, and we need more detailed analysis of the interactions between blood and membrane. We also need to make sure that the behavior of the device is stable over a long period of time. You go into a dialysis unit, you get dialyzed. You get dialyzed for 3.5 hours. Treatment's over. Technician takes the needles out, nurse takes the needles out. What happens to that dialyzer? Well, typically it goes in the red bag. It's discarded. We need something that's going to work not for 3.5 hours, not for 3.5 days, not for 3.5 months. We need something that is going to be surgically implanted in a patient and keep working. And so we need to understand that the performance and the behavior of that device is stable, not just for a brief window of time on the bench, but over the lifetime of the patient who's going to be treated with it. So these are the things that we think about: is safety, 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 and is the device stable, and is it safe not just one time once, but over a much longer period of time.
Awesome. Thank you. So now we've heard those are our preclinical study updates. And I've been seeing on the live feed, or the live chat, we have several questions that came up about funding, and we will definitely be talking about that today. Now, as promised, I want us to circle back around to the clinical trials, which are the human studies that are very popular and highly anticipated amongst our community members. So we mentioned this earlier, but we have a lot of new viewers that have joined us since the beginning of our stream. So I'm going to ask Dr. Roy, could you please just reiterate for us when the clinical trials will be starting?
Sure. So again, welcome to the people that have joined us over the last half hour. So the clinical trials for the bioartificial kidney, first of all, let me just be clear. It's not one trial. It's, as many medical devices are, is a series of trials. And we have had the fortunate experience of working with the US FDA to help us plan a roadmap of what these tests will be about and how we'll get to final product approval. So having said that, and reminding everybody, we have a device that consists of two key components, a filtration unit and a biological unit that contains cells. And with discussions with the scientific collaborators, regulatory partners, we identified the key safety consideration of our device was in the hemofilter, and specifically its compatibility with blood, or rather not to have any problems with blood contact. So the very first trial we'll pursue is to show safety of the hemofilter and show that it's compatible with human blood. So the initial clinical trial for safety will begin in 2018 is our hope. And I know that in the past you may have seen the date of 2017, and let me take a moment to explain why we say 2017 and now we're saying 2018. So both Dr. Fizel and I have worked very hard to build up our collaborative team and get as fast as we can to the safety, the parameters that will be needed to apply for a clinical trial. Some of the challenges are technical, mostly anticipated but solvable. And the other challenge has been funding. And many of you have heard me talk about the need for funding along with Dr. Fizel over the past few sessions. It's only just earlier this year, 2017, that we are finally able to successfully raise all the money needed for the preclinical testing of the hemofilter. So that now allows us to complete those tests and think about the clinical trials of the hemofilter. So given the timeline of what it takes to put together an application and approval, we think that it's most likely to happen in 2018, although there's a slight possibility it could happen in 2017. There's always hope. So the initial clinical trials will begin in 2018, and that's the first safety trial. After that, we'll still have to conduct an overall safety trial of the bioreactor and the combined device and show that it's efficacious in patients that have kidney failure. And that will take us ultimately to a final product.
Okay. Thank you for providing that detailed update on the clinical trial plans. Now, just to hammer home a few points, when should our community members expect to hear the next bit of news for the clinical trials? We've said, they'll start 2018, slight possibility 2017. So what's the next news point that they should look to hear?
So we have made the application for the first clinical trial, and you're on the right forum if you're on Facebook now, and especially on the Kidney Project Facebook page. This is the forum we'll make all our announcements about the latest advances in our project. When we get approvals, when we make scientific and clinical advances, and there's any regulatory news, we'll always make sure to let the community know through our Facebook page. So that's how you'll know. When? As soon as we have any news, we'll post it through this community. And again, I'll urge you all to like our Facebook page. And then if there's interest in the clinical trials, we have an interest list that you can sign up for as well.
Yes, great. Thank you for bringing that up, because I want to share that. I've definitely seen those questions appear, that question appear on our live chat. Everyone's asking, how can I become involved with the clinical trials? And at this point, the best way to become involved is to sign up on our online database. This is not a wait list. However, we are collecting names and addresses, email addresses, for individuals who would like to know more. And when our trial receives approval and we're able to begin moving through the process to set up our initial clinical trial, we will message everyone in our database to provide that update. We will also message it on our Facebook page. But if you would like to put your information in our database and make sure you are in the loop, you can find the URL for our database in our frequently asked questions document, which is posted on kidney.ucsf.edu. And we also post the link to our online database on our Facebook page if you look back to a few previous posts, and we will be reposting it again in the future. So on our Facebook page or on our frequently asked questions document at kidney.ucsf.edu, you can find an online database. Okay. Real quick, this is a question that we got from Orlando Filo in Brazil, and he asked, is there any way for us to know what month in 2018 the trials might start?
I will say, Orlando, first of all, thank you for your question, and thanks to the international community that has joined us. And this is really an international project, and we have supporters and participants from all over the world. So just know that you're very inspiring to our team, and we hope to deliver for the whole community out there. We do not know. It could be as early as January. It could be as late as, frankly, December. I don't have that control. We are doing everything we will need to do to get our materials in, but there's also the questions that will come back from the review boards that look at the human research applications. There'll be other overseeing bodies. And while I can't give you an exact month, we just think it's going to be sometime early 2018. And again, I can't make promises, but we're very hopeful that we'll be able to pursue that sometime next year. Is it possible it slips? It is possible. Hopefully not. But again, we will let you know as soon as we know.
Great. Thank you for those reassurances. The next question will be for Dr. Fasel. And Dr. Fasel, do we know what the criteria are to be involved in the initial clinical trial?
So, what a great question. We are working with the human safety review boards at our institutions and with the FDA to try to understand what would be the inclusion and exclusion criteria for a patient who might be willing to participate in our initial safety studies or in a subsequent efficacy study of the device. At first pass, we're considering dialysis patients who have a working fistula or graft, who are candidates for a transplant but have had challenges in getting transplanted because of their high sensitization, it's called a panel reactive antibody or a PRA level. That doesn't mean that patients who are not listed for a transplant or have another barrier to transplant could not possibly be candidates. It's just that we've been talking with the FDA and with our institutional review boards about who would be a likely candidate, who would be have the best safety profile to approach for participation in a safety study.
Okay, awesome. And back to you, Dr. Roy. Could you speak to us about, so we know that the clinical trials, we've applied and they'll be happening hopefully sooner than later, but what does that mean in the context of international patients? Will they be considered, or will it be limited to patients already in America?
So the initial clinical trials will happen most likely at Vanderbilt and UCSF, just because that's where the majority of the team members are based. But after the initial safety trials, there'll be additional trials which will be held at multiple sites. And we have not finalized which these sites are. A lot of it will depend on the logistics and partners we're able to bring to join our effort. But there's no reason to think that an international site is going to be excluded. There may be more logistical issues, and we may have to work through that. And in some cases, that may be hard to get to. But at this point, our goal is to get it out there to everybody. Again, to summarize, the initial clinical trial will likely be in the U.S. As we move to multi-sites, we'll consider sites both other parts of the United States and the world.
Okay, thank you. I know that question does come up a lot from our community members about international patient participation in the clinical trials. And I'd like to reiterate that a great way to stay involved is to check our Facebook page, and also everyone around the world is welcome to enter their information into our online database, who we will plan to contact as news of our clinical trials develops. Just to touch on one more clinical trial timeline question, this is still for you, Dr. Roy. In the past, we've discussed that there could be an end of clinical trials in 2020 or 2021. Could you speak to us a little bit about, so far we've talked about when they might start, but also when they might end, or what our, best forecasts for that may be?
Sure, happy to give the clarification to the community. So obviously, this is a unprecedented device. This device does not exist. So there's really no other device we can use to predict how our device will go through both the clinical trials and the regulatory approval and commercialization process. But we can look towards other implanted devices like stents as artificial hearts that have been implanted in the past, orthopedic implants. And typically, these medical devices go through 2 or 3 rounds of clinical trials before they get to market. So using that precedent as a guideline, we can project that in a favorable scenario where we don't have unanticipated challenges and the funding is sufficient, that it will be after the initial clinical trials, it will be 1, 2, or 3 years of additional trials, and if everything goes successfully, we are approved for product. So I present that scenario as sometime 2020 or 2021 as being a possible timeline when this could be a product on the market.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. I just want to take a moment and just review a little bit about what we've discussed today. For those of you who might have joined us since we began, my name is Susan Cram, and I am the project manager of the Kidney Project. And with me today, you just heard from Dr. Shubha Roy, who's streaming from UC San Francisco. And we also have Dr. Bill Fussell streaming from Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. And they are the 2 directors of the Kidney Project. So far today, we have talked about some questions for, if once this is implanted in patients, what would their daily life be like? What are the practical medical questions? We've touched on the preclinical testing and what results we have to share so far, as well as our upcoming plans for clinical trials, which is very exciting. I want to reiterate that today we will also be releasing an updated frequently asked questions document. And you can find this on our Facebook page later today or on our UCSF website, which is kidney.ucsf.edu. And there are additional questions that I've seen on the stream and that were submitted earlier, which we won't have time to answer today, but that we purposefully put in the FAQ document so that you can read about them and still have answers to those burning questions. So please do check that out. We are, roughly 48 minutes into our hour-long broadcast, so I'm going to try to buzz through a few more questions. But if you have a question that we weren't able to answer, you're always welcome to contact us via Facebook or email. The next couple of questions will be for Dr. Fussell again. And Dr. Fussell, so these questions are just a little broad, general about the bioartificial kidney device. And for example, do we know about how much the device might cost?
So that's very hard to project. I think that there's some very clear examples of medical devices and pricing for comparison, whether they be LVADs, whether they be the cost of procurement and then maintenance of an organ transplant, such as a kidney or liver or heart or lungs. And then there's the absolutely overwhelming cost of dialysis, which is $85,000, $90,000 per patient per year. I think that speaking about marketing of a device 3-4 years down the road from right now, I think it's a little early to be trying to stick price tags on it. We anticipate that we will be less expensive than trying to get an organ transplant done. We anticipate that it will be less expensive than dialysis. And we also expect to have better outcomes than dialysis and much broader access to the technology than is available for organ transplant today.
Great, thank you.
Susan, may I add to that, Susan?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the cost, I think, can be looked at two different ways. There's a cost to make the artificial kidney and cost to make it available, and the price it is available to patients. So in the United States and probably many other countries, the price to patients is dictated by a number of factors that can be economic, the business side, or the government putting price guidelines and whatnot. So what we have done is we cannot predict what that price might be, especially since we haven't gone to the commercialization stage of the overall kidney project and making it available. But from the projections we do have on the cost to manufacture, cost to produce, we know it will be cost on the order of what implant devices cost to make. So we have pacemakers, we've got artificial hearts, what they cost to make, and we know that our devices will be competitive. And when we look at that within the context of the overall costs to the insurance companies for dialysis or transplant, will definitely be competitive, most likely less than a transplant, and certainly cheaper than dialysis. I just want to make sure that people understand the difference between what it costs to make and what it's pricing are two different things. And our goal is to make it available to the community, but the cost to produce it will be certainly much cheaper than what many medical devices may be charged to patients today.
Great. Thank you for elaborating on that. Sticking with Dr. Roy, I do have another question for you. This was submitted earlier by a Facebook community member, Yang Kai Ning. And Yang asks, at what stage is the kidney project and what are the biggest technical difficulties at the moment?
So thank you for that question. And we are today in the midst of preclinical testing. The hemofilter is in advanced testing in the preclinical setting. We have begun the testing of the bioreactor as well. In terms of technical hurdles, I think we've alluded to this before and explained them in the past. So in terms of the hemofilter, it's really about blood compatibility and how it's going to filter blood and generate ultrafiltrate. And at a very broad level, we want to ensure that there's not a blood clot. Blood clot could not only prevent filtration, but it could also cause other deleterious side effects on the patient if the clot should dislodge. So we always think about how can we extend the lifetime of the filter? How can we make sure the filter doesn't clot? There's also some work to be done around surgical considerations. If you recall, what I said before, this is an unprecedented device. Nothing like this exists. So how will it actually be implanted? Well, we have some guidance from transplant kidneys, but that's a soft, organic tissue. We're talking about something that's biohybrid, made of semiconductors, metals, and plastics. So some of the surgical considerations have to be tested out, and we're doing that in the animal testing as well. On the bioreactor, which performs the volume reabsorption and provides some of the metabolic functions, The key functional component is the cells of the kidney tubule that will provide the functions in our biohybrid device. Now, we are growing these cells in a synthetic bioreactor. What does that mean? It's not being grown in tissue, in organic tissue like we have inside our bodies. So the challenges we have to overcome is to make sure these cells stay functional, they perform what they're supposed to do inside the bioreactor, and it's for as long as possible. So how do we go about doing that? We are optimizing the substrate, the surface it's growing on. We're optimizing the fluid flow patterns, how the ultrafiltrate flows over that. So those are iterative processes. And if I was to think in terms of technical challenges of the bioreactor, it's optimizing the cells to survive for a long time, ideally forever. And on the hemofilter, it's about making sure we have this membranes not to get clogged up, and the surgical connections are robust. So those barriers, they're barriers that are anticipated. We have to work through them. We are working through them, and hopefully we'll solve them before the end is done.
Absolutely. Thank you. We are wrapping up our live stream right now. We have just about 5 minutes left, probably. So I do want to make sure that we talk about funding for a moment. I've been watching the live feed, and there definitely were some questions about that. So staying with you, Dr. Roy, could you, so one thing that comes up often is, double question for you. So one thing that comes up is people ask, where is our money sourced from that funds the Kidney Project? And the second part of the question is, have we ever considered crowdfunding? Because as the Kidney Project is so popular, it seems like that might be a viable option.
Great question. And many thanks to you, Susan, as well as the community for bringing that up. So most of our funding to date has come from grants from the government and foundations, as well as private individuals like many of our participants today. And we have been very fortunate that much of that funding has allowed us to get to the point where we are today. And so using a combination of federal grants, foundation support, and private philanthropy, those contributions that many of you on Facebook have made through the donation page are all supporting us and have gotten us to the point where we are today. A question that has come up in the past is, why don't you go ahead and get private investment? And the short answer is we have tried, and we continue to try to do that. And here, being in the Silicon Valley, where there's a lot of investors, and being at the two universities with our collaborators and colleagues at the universities who know other people who are in the investment community, we've reached out. And the feedback has universally been, this is great. This is a really important project. However, from a return on investment perspective, from a financial investment perspective, you are still too risky until you get through the first set of clinical trials. And because of that, we've decided that we should continue to raise funds through grants and philanthropy till we get through to the first clinical trials. About crowdfunding, that's a great suggestion. And yes, we have tried it. In fact, we've tried a couple of times, and I should put out that as we speak, there's actually a crowdfunding campaign right now. Our previous project coordinator, Stephanie, who many of you knew, is actually walking the Appalachian Trail. So for the people outside of the United States, this is a 2,000-mile journey from the state of Georgia all the way to Maine. And she's walking it. She's walking it over 6 months. And she's walking it with the intent of raising money for the Kidney Project. So please look at our website, look at the crowdfunding platform. Susan will provide you the link again through Facebook, and support her. So we have done some work through crowdfunding. We've had a couple of successful crowdfunding, and it's one element of our overall strategy to raise the funds. But overall, it's a combination of philanthropy and grants that have allowed us to get to this point, and we anticipate it will let us continue through the initial clinical trials, at which point we'll again solicit private investment.
Awesome. Thank you for providing all that information. And just to touch on Stephanie's Hike for the Kidney Project, as you mentioned, our previous project coordinator who's hiking the Appalachian Trail, her fundraiser, of which 100% of the proceeds will be donated to the Kidney Project, is closing 1 week from today. And we will post on Facebook. Again, it's in our previous post, but we'll post today as well the link to her page. And she has blog updates and photos that she's been sharing along her 6-month journey, which is wrapping up in the near term. So thank you all for joining us in the last hour. I just want to review a few key points that we've talked about today. We talked about practical questions, medical questions, if the device were to be implanted in you, the status of our preclinical trials, the status of our clinical trials, some general, how does the device work, what problems are we overcoming currently. And to remind you all, we will be releasing an updated frequently asked questions document today, mere hours or sooner after the stream. So please go ahead and check that out. It'll be on our Facebook page and at kidney.ucsf.edu. Thank you to everyone who has submitted questions, and I hope that we were able to hit a lot of the burning questions that you guys have. Dr. Faisal, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to share with the community?
I want to thank all of you for your attention. As I've said before, my patients are my heroes, and you are all why we're doing this. So thank you for your attention, and please stay tuned. And we hope to continue to give you more good news as we make progress.
Absolutely. And Dr. Roy, any last words?
I reiterate whatever Dr. Faisal just said. And again, many thanks to the Facebook community everywhere around the world. In all that you do for us, you inspire us, you push us, you support us. So thank you. And this is a collective journey.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I'll just echo that one more time. Thank you to everyone on Facebook who's joined us. We are the Kidney Project, and we are now signing off. Thank you. Goodbye.